Welcome to this video about transfer pricing for tangibles. We're talking about the transfer pricing method, the comparable uncontrolled price method. In a previous video we talked about using internal comparables that might exist, and in this video we're going to talk about external comparables. So to talk about what I mean by an external comparable, and in the comparable uncontrolled price method, or CUP, we're looking at the price of a transaction that might be used as a reference point for a related party transaction. So there are certain areas of the economy where there's a lot of detailed information available, publicly available data about the pricing for things, especially when they're very commodity oriented. So imagine in this diagram here that you're advising the taxpayer who is making a sale of property to a related party, tangible property, and a CUP based on an external source would be able to observe a transaction in the bottom row between two unrelated parties for the same property, same type of property, comparable in all regards, or if not perfectly comparable, at least something you can make an adjustment for. And you can use that price as a reference point for the price in the first transaction, the transaction that's the related party transaction. Now, often this type of analysis is being done using what the regulations refer to as indirect evidence. And that is essentially you're finding pricing information from an outside source, often from a public exchange or a quotation media. And there are certain requirements that must be followed if you're going to do that. So the first off, if you find a data source like this and you're using it, say you find a source that quotes the price of oil or the price of other commodities, and you're going to use that for an internal transaction, you have to be sure you can answer the following questions. And that is this data widely and routinely used in the ordinary course of business? So this is essentially a source of data being used regularly in business, so there's no doubt that it's an appropriate data source to work from. Now, if the data source from the public exchange or quotation media is used to set prices, is it used in the same way by the uncontrolled taxpayers as it's used in the industry? Just to make sure you're following along with exactly how this would be done. And finally, you may need to make adjustments to reflect any differences in product quality or quantity, maybe the contractual terms or transportation costs or other market conditions, etc., that would affect the pricing. So one might say that you could find the price of one type of oil. Say oil has different grades, Nigerian Bonny Light or North Sea or West Texas Intermediate Crude. You may need to make a difference, price adjustment, if one can't observe the exact price that you need, because different oils, as they come out of the ground, have different characteristics, which may make them harder or easier to refine into products that you want to use, such as diesel fuel and gasoline. So, just as an example, when you look at this, you'd say, would market prices for oil from the Gulf of Mexico in September 2014, why that might not be a good benchmark for an oil price from the North Sea in December of 2014? Well, you've got several differences going on there. One is the location, right? It's the difference between shipping it from Gulf of Mexico to refineries probably in Texas or Louisiana versus taking the North Sea oil to a refinery. You've got a difference in time, which is the price of oil could move substantially over the period of several months. You've also got a difference in the possible grade of the oil because they're coming from different locations. It may be that you can make adjustments for all those or may not. It's just one of the things that one should keep in mind when considering using an external data source to make sure you have adjusted for all those differences as need be. One other key point not to forget is that the use of public exchange or quotation medium may not be appropriate under extraordinary market conditions. And that is to say that the price that gets quoted in those exchanges can get distorted under certain extreme scenarios, and you may not want to use that data. I'm going to bring up an example here that is relatively striking, and that is the financial crisis of 2008. So let's look at this visually. This chart shows the interest yield on a BAA bond, 20-year term, as published by the Federal Reserve. Now, when you look at this, you can clearly see the impact of the crisis that hit the markets in 2008. Those interest rates spiked up to extreme levels. They are prices, they were quoted, they were people doing transactions potentially at those prices, but one can see that it really moved off the trend line. If you were a smart treasurer, you are not likely to be issuing new long-term debt where you might have to pay, in this case, over 9% to raise that funding. You might say, in a financial crisis, I would delay obtaining any long-term funding that's going to lock me into a very high interest rate. I'll wait till the market stabilize. I'll fund short-term if need be so that I'm not locking in this very expensive money. And if a related party were to point to this number and try to convince the tax authorities that they really did use the market price of 9%, I think the tax authorities would have a strong argument for saying that transaction was not rational, that a smart treasurer wouldn't have done that, that it was done primarily to create a large interest expense deduction. And they may throw out that as a comparable point and come back and start talking about what kind of an adjustment they think should happen on your tax return. Thank you. If you've liked this video, please give us a comment or a like at the end of the on the YouTube channel. And we're going to continue with a few more examples about how one might use cups.